Hi folks, welcome to another episode of My Life with Robert Burns. We're really pleased you could join us again tonight. Jim Thompson, my friend and colleague from Newcomer Burns Club, is with me. He's here with us for a chat with our Burns colleague. Hi Jim.
Hi Douglas, hi everybody.
Today's guest is extremely well known in the Burns world, and further afield than that as well. From recitations to singing to playing the pipes, even to kilted yoga. Tonight, we'd like you to welcome Cammy Goodall. Hi, Cammy.
Hi, Douglas. Hi. I don't prefer to be known as a yogi. You know, it's it's something that I mean. That was just a wee bit of marketing shtick. It was just grabbing the opportunity. You know, catch the moments as they fly, as it were. You know, and it was very much in the moment. Well, a hilarious thing about that, I have to say, just a wee digression before we get into the meat and potatoes of the thing. You know, I mean, that picked up something like 1.4 million views or something like that. I mean, it was crazy the amount of views I was getting, particularly on Facebook, some on YouTube, but mainly on Facebook. And what I found hilarious going back and reading the comments was the folk that hadn't seen the thing that we were parodying, and they just thought, what are these two crazy buggers on in the forest?
Tremendous.
Oh.
Well, anyway, tell us a bit about yourself.
Aye, certainly. I mean, I'm reliably informed that I was born in Paisley. I don't remember it myself, you know, but that's what I'm told. At the Ross Infirmary, 19th of May, 1969. You can stick that in your diary if you want to send me a card every year, you know. To my mother Maureen, my father Jim, professionally known as Bob. My father was a Polish like yourself, Jim, but he in the family he was always known as Jim. His first name was Robert, but when he joined the Renfrewshire and Bute Constabulary, there was already God knows how many Jameses and Jimmies and Jims and what have you. So he decided to revert to his first name, Robert. So he got known as Bob during his career, and Jim at home mainly. So it depends on who you're speaking to, whether it's Jim or whether it's Bob. We just called him Jim Bob, you know. But and my mother, she was in banking. I had one sister, Sue, and we were at loggerheads with one another almost constantly. We were a family that fought very easily, you know. It wasn't just me and my sister, my father and my mother constantly bickering. They are still, you know, just all the time. The thing was, my father was guy busy, you know, in his professional. You know, he was the youngest chief inspector, I think, in the Strathclyde Force when he got made a chief inspector, and then he was diagnosed as having angina when he was in his early 30s, and his career just plateaued and he never went any further. And by the time he was pensioned due to the police on ill health after 26 and a half years, which Jim will know that's the time when you can actually collect your pension. So, you know, he managed to hold on with the fingernails to 26 and a half years. And then that was him. And by the time he left Pitt Street, he was the longest serving chief inspector in the Strathclyde Force. So, but he was busy, obviously, you know, in charge of licensing latterly, and he was also he was a Kirk Elder, he was captain of the Boys Brigade, you know, he was a busy boy, you know. So we didn't see a great deal of my dad growing up, and so whenever we would go on holiday, I always got there. We used to go in caravan on holidays almost exclusively throughout my childhood, and I hate caravans now. We an absolute vengeance. I hate caravans, just because I got the impression that we only went on holiday so the two of them could have a fight. That's what it felt like to me. Honestly, it was constant. But I realised, you know, because as I say, my father retired. He was, I think he was about 3 years younger than I am now when he retired, and that's him. He's never worked another day since, never worked a stroke. So and they've been in one another's pockets ever since, and you know, they just bicker endlessly. You know, if they're, you know, if you're in their company and they haven't fought and 3 minutes have passed, you're beginning to wonder what's went wrong. You know, but and I don't know whether my sister and I just picked up on that kind of vibe, and you know, and we fought, or whether it was just, you know, regular sibling rivalry. You know, we love each other dearly. You know, the whole family. We've never had a major falling out. Nobody in the family. You know, but it was just a kind of frantic and sort of a angst-ridden childhood to an extent. You know.
So did things calm down as you get a bit older?
No, really, no. I just scarpered as quickly as I could. You know, school wasn't particularly happy for me. I went to Bishop in primary. I had a couple of good teachers. I was very lucky to get Mary Somerville in primary one, because the other primary one teacher would have been Mrs. Kemp, and she was a dragon, well known for being a dragon. My sister had her, in actual fact, and on one occasion, you know, I mean, like, she refused to let children go to the toilet and what have you, and then, you know, shouted at them for peeing in the flare. You know, I mean, she was a horrible woman. Luckily, I didn't get her. I got Mrs. Somerville, and she was a delight. And you know, a couple of other teachers during primary school were decent, but my primary 7 teacher she made up for it, because she was a harridan. She was a complete nightmare, and I used to get the belt all the time off of her, all the time. I mean, constantly. And I always have a laugh, in actual fact, you know, whenever Jimmy Law's doing the Lagelli Tours, and of course, you know, the punchline of that, or what it's driving at, is never did us any harm, sort of thing, you know. And of course, I don't think it certainly did me any harm. I don't seem to have suffered for any post-traumatic stress for getting hit with the leather belt, but I tell you, it didn't do me a damn bit of good either.
No.
Because everything that I used to get belted for, I'm still guilty of to this day, you know. So it didn't teach me a damn thing either.
That include peeing on the floor.
Oh, that wasn't me. I've peed in some queer places, but no in the flare. Secondary school wasn't much better, to be honest with you. I just, I've I been someone that can't guard my tongue. If I see something that's happening and I think it's unjust, or I think it's just plain wrong or wrong-headed, I'll say, and I'll say every time, even if I know that there's genuine peril for myself and mentioning it, I'll still do it. And nothing's changed me in that regard, you know. So, high school wasn't great either. Very good music department though at Parkmains. Parkmains had an excellent music department. We had 3 full-time music teachers. Very, very rare in the high school. 3 full-time music teachers, as well as, you know, part-time ones that come in peripatetically to do instrumental lessons and what have you. But 2 of them in particular, the head of music was a fella called Keith Hamilton, and the other fella was Brian Dogood, and they competed with one another constantly, you know, and that created or engendered a spirit of excellence in the music department. And it was quite a big high school. I think there was about 1,400 wains there when I was at Parkmains, and probably about a third of them were involved in the music department in some way, shape, or form. About a third of the wains. Quite incredible, you know. So unsurprisingly, because, you know, music was the only thing that really floated my boat when I was at high school, that's what I wanted to do. And of course, you know, I had the usual kind of conversations with my mother and father, and that's not a career choice. That's you know, that's a daft concept. You can't be a musician. You'll never make any money at that. And then the army offered. Well, it was all boys in actual fact at the time. You know, the army was only really recruiting boys, or certainly the Scottish division were only recruiting boys as musicians at that stage. But we were given the opportunity to go way up to Bridge of Dawn, up just north of Aberdeen, to Scottish Division musical training depot up there for a week just to see what we thought. And of course, I had a whale of a time up there. I really, really enjoyed it. And I thought to myself, you know what? This is something that they can't really say no to. I mean, obviously, I was joining the army at the age of 16. They could have refused to sign the papers, but I knew that they didn't have a legitimate reason to do it. That's the thing. I had them kind of over a barrel, you know. They could have stopped me from going, but I knew that that right was on my side, you know, and so I stuck my heels in. And you know, my mother, I later found out, you know, pleaded with my dad to talk me out of it. Because bearing in mind, I mean, this is 1985. The Falklands had only been 3 years before. Northern Ireland was still very much, a hotbed at the time. You know, the H Block riots going on and what have you. And the last thing she wanted was her wee laddie going away and joining the army. You know, but my father says, "Ugh, you'll no stick it." You know, we should just let him go and get it out of his system, and he'll be back up the road in a fortnight. And aye, very good. 30 years I got out the army, man and boy, you know. So,
Wow.
Aye, that was it.
Yeah. And where did you go to with the army? Did you get any exciting places?
Aye, all over the place, You know, as a musician in the army in particular, it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful job. And I wouldn't change it for the world. I did my training down in the south of England in Dorset, a place called Bovington. A big tank museum down there if you're ever doing that neck of the woods. And it was kind of the home of the Royal Armoured Corps. But for some reason, that's where they had moved the Army Junior School of Music to by that stage. So that's where I did my training. I did 2 years at Bovington, and then I joined my battalion, and it was the Black Watch I joined. They wanted me to join the RHF, actually, the Royal Highland Fusiliers, and that wasn't my local regiment, as it happens, because Bishopton was more Paisley, therefore Inverclyde, and therefore actually we fell into the Argyll and Southern Highlanders recruiting territory. But the RHF was seen as being a more local choice for me than the Black Watch, who are, you know, Perthshire, Fife and Angus. But I insisted on the Black Watch for a completely spurious reason. My grandmother had a tea towel of amazing grace, and a piper stood on the esplanade at Edinburgh Castle. And I'd asked my gran, "Who's that?" And she said, "It's a piper of the Black Watch, son." So I'm like, "Oh, that's where I'm going to go then. I'm going to join the Black Watch." And of course, it wasn't the Black Watch that did amazing grace, it was the Royal Scottish Dragoon Guards. My life could have been very, very different, you know, if I'd joined the cavalry, but there you go. Black Watch it was. And I joined them across in Berlin. And I was a round peg in a square hole, Douglas. You know, I didn't fit the army very well, as I say, you know, unguarded tongue. Have I been on the cuddly side? And,
well, you stuck it out for a long time for somebody that was a square peg.
Aye, that's it. And it's just because I'm thrown. That's what it comes down to. That's what it comes down to. I'm ridiculously thrown. And once I've decided I'm going to do a thing, then I'm going to do it, you know, and nobody's going to talk me out of it. And nobody's going to scare me out of it. But the Black Watch were a very kind of antiquated regiment. I mean, by the time I joined the Black Watch, it was 1987. Most of the army had kind of modernised to an extent. The Black Watch certainly hadn't. You know, you could still get the jail for your socks falling down and stuff like that.
Oh dear!
It was, you know, it was a scary situation to be in. You know. And as I say, It's a problem that my father had as well, and I've spoken to a few other male relatives. But, you know, my immediate nuclear family was quite small because I had one aunt, one uncle, and neither of the two of them had kids. I had all four of my grandparents up until I joined the army, which was very, very rare for my generation. You know, obviously going through the war and what have you, but I had all four of them. And but no cousins, not one. But my father's family was ridiculously huge. And oddly enough, where I stay just now, there's quite a cluster of them round about me because we are actually more of an East Coast family than we are a West Coast family. When you look at the wider family. And speaking to a few of them, you know, it's a problem that we all have. A few of my dad's cousins have done quite a lot of family genealogy. And this is interesting to me because I can trace my family back 14 generations, always in Scotland, father to son. And can't go back any further than that. That takes you back to 1660 in the parish of Yester, which is present-day Gifford, down in East Lothian. And it seems that for the majority of that time, we were pithead blacksmiths. And that's about as political as you get, you know. It's bad enough being a miner. It's bad enough being a blacksmith. Being a blacksmith at the top of a pit, that's a perfect storm, you know. So I think there's a real problem with, you know, with male members of the family just, you know, speaking their mind, you know, and the hell with the consequences, and being feared greatly by you know, people who are over us in authority. You know, I never ever tried to usurp the authority of someone that, you know, that was actually in a place of authority over me. But you know, people can, you know, they sniff the intellect and they just think, oh, I've got one here, you know. I better watch my back, you know. And I think my dad was kind of similar in the Polish, to be honest with you, you know, to a certain extent, you know.
So before we move on to talk about Burns, I mean, obviously your army career we could make presumably a whole podcast about that. But you want to just have a wee mention of your own family before we move on, because I'm sure we'll touch on the army stuff when we talk about Burns as well.
I mean, the thing is that my family are very well integrated into my story as it happens, because I met my wife in the army. You know, she was a musician in the army as well. So I mean, it was during my army career that we got together, which we, you know, for a gigging musician, it's difficult to find the time to meet a partner, you know. So once they started allowing women to join the army as musicians, which I was a big advocate of right from the off, it was a game changer because it meant that you didn't have to necessarily socialise with aliens from other worlds in order to find yourself a life partner. So and Jerry and I worked together for a year before we started going out together, which it's a wonderful situation to be in, lads, because she knows everything about me. Yeah, everything. And I wouldn't have it any other way, you know, because there's literally no skeletons in my closet that I know that someone could turn around and go, oh, bet you don't know this about him, because she knows the whole damn shooting match, and there's plenty salacious stories to tell, but she knows them all. And that's great, because she fell in love with me anyway.
In spite of that.
In spite of that.
Very good. And the girls are musicians as well.
They are. They are, and you know, we don't force it down their throats at all. I mean, they come to it quite naturally, you know. You know, my eldest, she plays guitar. My youngest plays violin. She's quite an accomplished keyboard player too. We push her to an extent with the violin, because violin's torture to listen to if they're no practicing, you know. So we make her practice the violin, but she practices the piano entirely, you know, organically. And they both sing, they write songs, they write music. Both of them do perform together. Aye, it's good. And as I say, no something that we forced on them, but they're surrounded by it. You know, I mean, I sing all the time. Jerry sings all the time, and so the girls do as well. They get into trouble for it at school, you know. And I'm just like, you know, whenever a teacher's like, she sings all the time. Okay. I get into Burns really through my father, you know, because my father, he never belonged to a Burns club or anything like that. He just he did all the you know, the police suppers in and around sort of Renfrewshire and Glasgow, and you know, from there he kind of branched out and started doing kind of golf clubs and bowling clubs and so forth. But he never ever joined a Burns club. My father, maybe because he didn't take to it until later on in life, I'm not sure. But I mean, he struggles to memorise poems and what have you. So I would hear him about the house, you know, conning over the verse and what have you. And then, of course, if we were having something at New Year's or something like that, he would wheel out. He really just did the big three for the repertoire, you know, the Haggis, Holy Willie, Tam O'Shanter at the time. You know, he's learned a couple since, you know, and every now and again he would be asked to toast the lassies or do the immortal memory or whatever, you know. But mainly the three big ones, because in the sort of circles that he was doing, nobody ever wanted to hear the Quarter Saturday Night. You know?
No.
so aye, that was that. But do you know, I would hear him going about the house, and I always, you know, I just knew I want to be that guy. I always just thought the language was so melodious, and it's just, I mean, it pulled at me. To the extent I went and choried the Burns book off his. There's a good Edinburgh word for you there. Choried his Burns book, and I learned the address to the Haggis completely unbeknownst to anyone. And I think I would have been about 8. You know, and it was the 25th of January, and my dad didn't have a supper on, and so he'd go to Haggis for the house, and they brought it out, and here I just addressed it, and you could have picked my father up off the flare, you know, because he didn't know I'd done it. You know, I just went and done it, and then that was that, and you know, and I know that this is kind of, we've already kind of encroached into the question that Jim, the question I was anticipating off of Jim, but there we go. Sorry about that. You don't get your man in the limelight, mate.
You're right. If you want to interview yourself, that's fine. And I'm sure Jim will come in with the next question.
That's it. But unlike everybody else that I've heard interviewed, I never had a hiatus. I never had a time that I could come away from Burns. I mean, for the age of 8, just a constant companion. And sort of, you know, I mean, by the time I was at the high school, I could do Holy Willie's Prayer, tap to toe. I started to learn Tam O'Shanter, kind of ran out of steam. I think I was a wee bit too into Lord of the Rings at the time. I was ever busy reading Tolkien or whatever, you know, and I just sort of, I let it lie. But do you know, I don't find it difficult, boys, and that's the crux of it. It's something that comes off easy to me, and that, so you know, I mean, you know, when folk are, I mean, you guys will know this as well. You know, many of the folk listening to this will know this. You know, when you get folk that come up to you after a supper and they're too fulsome in their praise. I mean, you like to hear the anonymous applause, but when someone comes up and they just won't let go of it, and it's like, you know, 3 minutes, they're saying, "Oh, it's so good, son," honestly, you know, and I just get horrendously embarrassed, because to me, it's just something I do. You know, it's no. I know that a lot of guys have to work hard at it, but I just never have had to. I'm finding it more difficult now, but maybe it's just because I was doing it. That you know, I mean, people come up to me and say, "How long did it take you to learn that, son?" And I dread that question with Tam O'Shanter, because the answer's an embarrassment. Because I learned Tam O'Shanter in 4 hours, and I sang in Ballykinler. Two stags, and I sang in Ballykinler, and I had it. That was me. Never left me. And you know, so I mean, it's just like people look at you and they're like, what? You know, just like completely incredulous because I've never met, and it's not like I've got I don't have a photographic memory. That's not what it is. It's just a facility for learning verse. It doesn't, I mean, whenever I try to learn ritual at the lodge or whatever, that doesn't go near as easy as learning poems and songs, you know. I'm still not bad at it, don't get me wrong, you know, I mean, I'm relatively quick at learning ritual too, but it's the fact that there's a rhyme scheme there, that there's a rhythm there, and it just chimes with me in a way, you know. Once you thoroughly understand the story, I don't know. I mean, they take longer to learn now, but I don't know whether it's just because I've learned all the good ones. And, you know, whenever I'm trying to learn something new, it's just a little bit of a chore. Possibly.
Well, having told us what the learning process was like, how about giving us 2 or 3 verses or something?
Sure, aye. I mean, one of the big problems with having a big repertoire is you're always struggling to think what to do. that is a bit of a... But what about if I give you the just thinking of things that you know you're unlikely to hear anybody else doing. So, and you know, I've literally never heard anyone else doing the author's earnest cry and prayer to the Scottish representatives in the House of Parliament. And I'm not going to do the whole thing because it's actually quite a long poem, but I'm going to do the postscript, which is about 6 stanzas.
Perfect.
Let half-starved slaves in warmer skies see future wine's rich cluster and rise. They're sort old Scotland Aaron Vies, but blithe and frisky she views her freeborn martial boys tack off their whiskey. What though their Phoebus kinder warms when fragrance blooms and beauty charms, when wretches range in famished swarms, the scented groves are hounded forth, disown their arms, and hungry droves, their guns a burden on their shoulder. They down abide the stink of powder. Their baldest stocks a hanker swither to stone a run, till scalp a shot that I fought trouder to save their skin. But tak a Scotchman frae the hill, clapping his cheek a healant Jill, say, this is Royal George's will, and there's the foe. He is nae thocht, but how to kill twa a blow. Nae called faint-hearted doubts tease him. Death comes, we cheer for aye sees him. We bloody honour welcome gies him, and when he falls, his latest draught of breathing leaves him in faint huzzas. Sages, their solemn may steek and raise a philosophic reek, and physically causes seek and climb and season. But tell me whiskey's name in Greek, I'll tell the reason. Scotland. My old respected mother, though whiles ye moistify your leather till when you speak ye aiblins blether, yet deal mac matter. Freedom and whiskey gang together. Tak off your witter.
Excellent, you're right. I've never heard that done before. That's tremendous.
Aye. See, I mean, that's another thing about not really having many role models. You know, I had outstripped my sole role model by the time I was in my early 20s. And pretty much everything I've learnt since, I've learnt independently of MD. You know, it's no like, sometimes I'll hear someone do something and think, oh, that's a new one on me. I'll just, I'll go and look it up in the book, but I won't try and reference what I've heard the person that I've heard doing it do. I mean, it happens very, very, very seldom that I hear someone and I think, happened to me in actual fact at the Tom McElraith competition a couple of years back. And the representative from the southern counties, as I think it still was at that time, came up for the Dumfries Ladies Burns Club, and she did a epistle to Davy, which I ken full weel. But there was something in the cadence of the way she said, "It's no in Mac and Muckle Mare," that just sort of, it was a light bulb moment for me. It's like, because I was always thinking, it's no in making much more, but it's no in making much more, that's a completely different thing, and it's just that caesura is what that's called in poetic terms. If you actually understand poetry, that's called caesura, where you intentionally put in a pause to subvert or change the meaning of what it is that you're trying to say. And I just thought, it just changed my mind about the poem. And as often, if I hear something remarkable in a poem, it's from someone who, is not in a Burns club, this is not to rubbish Burns clubs by any stretch of the imagination, but usually someone who has spent their entire Burns career in the bosom of a particular Burns club, they can't envisage a poem any other way than the way Willie Kirk does it, or the way that Bobby Jess does it, or the way that Angus Middleton does it. It's they hear what they think is the definitive version of it, and that's what it is for them, and nothing will change their mind about that. Whereas for me, you'll have noticed there when I was doing the authors there, or the postscript there, I use another. I hate to throw all these terms at you, but I use enjambment quite a lot. And what that is where a line runs into another line, particularly if you can run a stanza into another stanza, then it's very, very effective. Mm-hmm. And there's bits and pieces of enjambment that you'll hear regularly done, like in the Twa Dogs, what is it? I'm trying to think of this. It's the bit that runs into "Whore through the Steeks, the yellow letter Geordie keeks." Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to rewind it back a couple of lines for that, just to which I can't do very easily. I need to go for the start of the Exchange or something like that. And
Jim Thompson's usually got books running about him there, but I don't know how it's.
But that's an example there, because it's sort of like, very, very often people will deliver half the line, take a pause, start the next half of the line, and then complete the rhyme. But often you hear people doing things and they don't do that at all. Like To a Louse is a great example for me, because it's one that a lot of folk ken, but the way I deliver it is different to the way you'll hear often people come out with, "Ha! Where you going, you crawling fairly?" You hear that a lot. Now, someone sat in a church isn't going to, "Ha!" That never happens. It's going to be, "Oh, where are you going? You're crawling fairly. Your impudence protects you sorely, though I can't say, but you strunt rarely or gauze and lace, though, faith, I fear you dine but sparely on sick a place, you ugly creeping blasted winner." You see, just running one into the next.
Yeah. And
it just brings a whole other flavour to it. I think, anyway, for my tuppence worth, that's what I try to bring to it.
I don't know how many competitions I've seen you in, and I think you won them all. In fact, you certainly won the one I judged at the Mackle-Wraith one year. And you did something, it was something I'd never heard done before in public.
I think I did the Dream.
It was a dream.
Which I don't think I've ever done since. And if you asked me to do it now, I wouldn't have a bloody clue where to start.
I mean, you're really well known for readings, but
Aye.
you've a marvellous singing voice, and we're going to obviously have to get you to give us a wee tune before this ends.
Aye, sure. I mean, do you know, it was the verse that got me into Burns. You know, I was always more interested in the poetry than I was in the singing, because I saw the singing as being guy parochial to begin with, Jim. Whenever I heard singers, it was either like a Kenneth McKell or what have you, shortbread tin pish, and I wasn't interested in it at all. And it wasn't really until I probably, you know, because I'd had a full career as a folk musician, you know, and sung a lot of the time, and obviously, you know, things like Ye Jacobites and Killiecrankie and what have you, very much in the folk canon, and you know, songs that have very definitely passed through Burns's hands. I don't think you would say that he'd written Killiecrankie, but it's certainly he polished it a lot. And Ye Jacobites, I think, is his, you know, like directly for his pen. But I mean, the majority of it, I just here we go again, and it would just make me kind of a wee bit cringy and what have you. And it wasn't until I went to the Centre for Robert Burns Studies, you know, went chapping on the door there, looking to further my academic credentials. And you know, at the time, they'd only just got the go-ahead for the New Oxford editions, and so Jerry placed me under the supervision of Kirstine McHugh, and Kirstine obviously is all about the song, but specifically all about George Thompson, and that's the very aspect of Burns songs that I didn't like, that genteel drawing room kind of persona that you know, that still kind of pervades to a certain extent, you know. I was more a James Johnson fan, you know. Do you know, it was something that I was concerned about for a long time. I felt that Burns had done the dirty on James Johnson by throwing his lot in with George Thompson. And I'm saying this as the chair of the Edinburgh Burns Club, which was started by George Thompson, so I should be a bit more loyal. But there we go. But for me, you know, what the Scotch Musical Museum was trying to do was far more laudable than what the Select Collection of Scottish Airs was attempting to do, which was a money-making venture for George Thompson, not a doubt about it. James Johnson, I think, he'd invented, I don't know if you appreciate that, I don't know how well it's appreciated by the Burns world, but James Johnson had actually invented the first method of typesetting music. Before he started publishing the Scotch Musical Museum, if you wanted to publish music, manuscript, then you had to start with a virgin plate of copper and painstakingly scribe out lines and then go on with a stylus, and each note had to be etched in independently of one another. If you made a mistake, the brass had to get burnished, and off you go again, right for the off. And what James Johnson had discovered was a method of typesetting the music, you know, the way that you would have printed a newspaper until fairly recently, you know, with blocks of type. And it didn't look particularly elegant. It wasn't going to produce the sort of coffee table books that George Thompson was after populating the world with. But what it would do is it allowed for quick and easy pressings. And so that's how the Scotch Musical Museum came about, because he thought, well, what better way to use this new technology but to form a reliquary of the voice of Scotland. And again, it's something that Burns, it's another role that Burns fulfills for Scotland that I think goes largely unmentioned, as his role as a musical antiquarian, because James Johnson had in mind 2 volumes for the Scotch Musical Museum, and it's only through Burns's cajoling of various different other artists that they managed to parry that number up to 600 in the end for the Scotch Musical Museum. 600 songs, 6 volumes.
Wow.
A hell of a thing. And you know, I mean,
Tremendous.
for me, you know, the best example of how this has changed the face of Scotland is Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. Because if Burns hadn't showed us what a Scottish song's supposed to sound like, we might also be reduced to singing Negro spirituals at a rugby internationals, you know. You know, it's a flippant point, but it's true enough. It's
Yeah.
true enough because it took another 100 years, really, you know, after Burns, you know, collected the voice of Scotland. You know, with Johnson, we a few others, you know, I mean, he wasn't alone in the venture, but it took another 100 years before England got their act together, and like say Percy Grainger and you know, Ray Vaughan Williams and your man Cecil Sharp started collecting the voice of England, and by that time the Industrial Revolution had already wiped out the agricultural voice of England, gone, you know. And I think to a certain extent that's why England is such a it's impoverished in an artistic way. You know, they don't have terribly many cultural markers. I don't mean this to sound in any way kind of I mean, obviously, as a negative thing to say, but it's not, you know, I'm not meaning to bash them here. But it's just, you can tell what's Welsh, you can tell what's Scots, you can tell what's Irish. It's very difficult to tell what's the difference between British and English.
Cammy, that was absolutely enthralling and very educational in terms of Scottish music. And through your good self, I ended up getting myself a copy of the books that you've been talking about, and also you got me into Fred Freeman's album set doing Harrogate one year, and which I now listen to regularly.
Aye.
But talking about this one thing, I want you to be singing something. So before we finish this,
Well, you know,
got to sing something.
I'm going to sing something that, oddly enough, you know, Fred, I love his collection. I love Fred to bits. I think he's one of the most undersung people in, you know, in Burns circles, to be honest with you, because he very much produced you know, the sort of thing that I was after, you know, which was a kind of authentic sounding, you know, folk renditions of Burns songs. There was one that I was disappointed with on the album, and I've had this conversation with Fred, because when he did A Rosebud by My Early Walk, it was a very kind of parlour version of it, with the melody that everyone sings A Rosebud by My Early Walk to, which is The Shepherd's Wife. That's the name of that ear. But that's not the ear to which it was written to. It was written to an ear by Davy Siller from the Epistle to Davy, and it's a tune that's been rubbished by virtually everyone, and I, for the life of me, I don't know why. I honestly don't. I think it's a beautiful song when you hear it. I don't think it's necessary to sing Burns's songs to the melodies for which they were intended, but I think it's necessary to at least reference that melody in order to get a full appreciation of what the song is actually driving at. And for me, once I fully grasped this tune, I realised that it's not about a rose, it's about a rose bud. And fragility is a big part of what the song is all about. A rosebud by my early walk, down a corn and closed box, say gently, bent its thorny stalk all on a dewy morning, ere twice the shades o' dawn are fled, and all its crimson glory spread. Aye, and dripping rich the dewy head, it scents the early morning. Within the bush, her covert nest, a little linnet fondly pressed, the dew sat chilly on her breast, sae early in the morning. She soon shall see her tender brood, the pride, the pleasure o' the wood, amang the fresh green leaves bedewed, awake the early morning. So thou, dear bird, young Jeanie fair on trembling string, or vocal air shall sweetly pay the tender care that tends thy early morning. So thou, sweet rosebud, young and gay, shall beauteous blaze upon the day, and bless the parents' evening ray that watch thy early morning.
As always, brilliant.
Thank you, Jack.
That was fantastic, Cammy. Tremendous. Very, very emotive, that version.
Aye. It brings a whole other, you know, you can tell that there's peril there, you know. The rosebud has potential to be a beautiful thing, but it's fragile, you know, and it might not necessarily ever come to fruition. And I think that's a very important part of the message of that song. And when you, a rosebud by my early walk, down a corn and closet walk, it's pretty enough, but it's vapid in comparison, I think, you know.
Excellent. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time, and I think we've proved by listening to you, and I'm aware that we've not covered half of the material we'd hoped to cover. So can I ask you, would you be available later on in the year or early next year maybe to do another one?
Of course. I mean, I'm a hell of a blather. I'm well aware of
that. Thoroughly enjoyed it, Cammy, and I'm sure our audience will enjoy it as well. But I think there's so much more there that we need to find out about you. So I think just now it just leaves me to say thanks for giving up your time to tell us the first part of your life with Robert Burns, and hopefully we'll see you again in the near future.
No bother at all, and just keep your noses clean, the pair of you, because I'm making a list and I'm checking it twice.
Thanks very much, Cammy.
Cheers now.